Hello and welcome to the Sthenics podcast. I'm your host, Dennis, and like always, I'm here with Leo.
Hi everyone, nice to be back.
So, I think we'll keep the introduction short this time since our last podcast wasn't long ago. We managed. And we will get right into it. Today, we will talk about the Frontlever and tell you everything you need to know to approach the skill and to learn the skills, the do's, the don'ts, the typical mistakes that you see people making. And yeah, I would say we would start with a short introduction, maybe a personal story. Leo, how long did it take you to learn the front lever? How would you categorize it as a skill, as an easy or a harder one? And do you think that everyone can learn the front lever? So the three most asked questions.
Okay, so the front lever as a skill, everyone says that it's an easy skill and so on, because on Instagram, as always, you see some phenomenal guys that can hold it for 30 to 40 seconds like nothing. But if you do a reality check, if you train a lot of people, you see that also the front lever, it's not an easy skill at all. So on average, I would say that it's easier to achieve a front lever in comparison to a planche. But for example, for me, it took longer to achieve a solid front lever than a planche because, yes, for some reasons, I mean, in the beginning, as you know, I was training. I thought that I was training with a good training plan, but in the end, everything was chaotical, very random. And by training randomly, I was able to progress on planche constantly, while on front lever it took me years to achieve it. But yes, at the end, I got also the front lever pretty randomly. And yes, for me, for example, it was a little bit harder than the planche, but it's an exception. Usually, it's easier to achieve the front lever, and I would say that it's not possible for everyone to achieve the front lever. But you shouldn't be, how to say, sad about that, because in order to see if you didn't train for years, I would say at least 6-7 years, with a good training plan, with good nutrition, with good recovery, I think you cannot really be sure that you're not able to achieve the front lever. So nothing to be worried about. Invest your time. I mean, you're training because you like to train, not in order for the end result. I mean, you should train because you like to train, not just for the end result, because the end result a lot of time can be disappointing. So yes, just train it and see how it goes. Usually, of course, for higher, taller people and bigger people, it's harder, like every horizontal skill. And I don't know why, and I've noticed in time that for the front lever, probably it's just empirical, or probably it's because I have a bias toward my case. When you have bigger legs, it's in my mind, it's like they influence more the front lever than the planche, and I don't really know why, but yes, probably.
Yeah, I think it's because your planche was always stronger than your front lever. Probably. If you have like 10 seconds of planche and you could hold the front lever for about 5 seconds or 7 seconds, the difference, like you have more buffer on one side, probably.
Yes, probably just anecdotally, it's just my case. And yes, that's it. I don't know if there are some other people that are disadvantaged for the front lever, but that's it. High and weight. Of course, the more the weight is on the legs, the more disadvantages it is.
People with big calves.
Yes.
Very nice. So now is a nice little short introduction. I think we'll start with what do you need and what are the prerequisites. When you look online, like everyone tells you have to do so many pull-ups to start training for the front lever. And honestly, there's no magical number, and that's not true. The only thing that you need is a muscular basis that allows you to go into that position and hold it. The prime movers for the front lever are the latissimus dorsi and the long head of the tricep, as well as for harder progressions from the one leg advanced on. The core gets involved a lot, as well as glutes stabilizers. So working on those muscles, the vertical fibers of the latissimus dorsi and the horizontal fibers of the latissimus dorsi will create a base that will allow you to hold the first progressions of the front lever. We personally like to build the client's muscle and the back muscles to a point where they can directly start with the advanced tuck front lever, just because with the tuck front lever, many tend to close their chest more because they have the knees towards on their chest, and they don't manage to get into the right scapular position. So the scapular position in the front lever is a neutral and depressed one. We don't want to retract like crazy, because if we retract too much, we have a hard time activating the lat, and we will use muscles like the little muscles like the infraspinatus more, or the rhomboids more, and that's where actually the injuries in front lever happen. They're quite rare usually. It's a pretty safe exercise because you just hang there, and if you can't anymore, you just let yourself go. So pull up usually is safer than something like a dip. And that's the same reasons. That said, we like to start with the advanced tuck front lever and learn the right technique. Another advantage that it has compared to the tuck is that you actually have to use your core a tiny bit, and you understand how to engage your hip flexors and core the right way to find the right line. And all these things are not there in the tuck. Of course, if you're having a very hard time to get to the point where you can start with the advanced tuck, learning the tuck can be an option, especially for girls, where learning the front lever is harder, usually just because of their weight distribution and where they usually build more muscle or store more fat. There it could be an option, but you have to be very careful about the fact that the tuck is very difficult to do right. So that is the starting point, and as soon as you can like hold an advanced tuck and you feel safe in an advanced tuck, and it feels good, you can start training it. That said, how would you structure a training for a beginner? Let's say I can do my pull-ups. I have a decent back musculature. I've been training for a while. I test my first advanced tuck front lever. It's not very clean, but I can hold it for 3 to 5 seconds somehow. How would you, Leo, start writing the plan for me so I can improve on it?
Okay, yes. First of all, I would add, in order just to give an idea, we like to say that before starting to train directly the front lever, we want to see at least 10 to 12 pull-ups, nice, performed correctly. And that's, like you said, not just due to the fact that there is something magical about pull-ups, but usually when someone is able to do 10 to 12 pull-ups, that means that he has already built a decent muscle mass in for what regards latissimus dorsis and all the prime movers of the front lever. And a thing that we didn't touch is the dragon flag.
Yeah, true. I forgot about that.
Yes,
Extremely important.
A thing that we always like also before starting to train the front lever directly is to work on the dragon flag. And this because in the front lever, also the core, it's very engaged. And if we work on the dragon flag, we can build the strength for the core in advance, and this then will allow us to train the front lever without having to focus too much on the core, because the strength will be already there, let's say, from the dragon flags. And for what regards the dragon flags, I mean, personally, I like to have the dragon flag in its complete form before starting the front lever. But I mean, also if we, I think that a couple of repetitions in one leg advanced tuck front lever, dragon flag with pose in bottom position are enough. So the dragon flag really teaches you how to keep the core engaged then in the front lever, because it's the exact same thing. And in general, to be honest, the dragon flags, in my opinion, are the best exercise that you can do for your core if you don't feel pain, of course. For yes, in calisthenics. And yes, I don't know. We have seen that someone is saying that the dragon flag it's a back musculature exercise, but that's not true, guys. That's a core exercise, so it has to be seen like a core exercise. Of course, if you do dragon flags with straight arms, then you're engaging the lats more, but then you really don't know why you are doing them, because they should be used for the core. So if you keep your arm straight, you will fatigue your back musculature faster, and then you won't be able to train as nicely for your core. So set your goals, and that's it. From there you can come to conclusions. And do you want me first to touch a little bit on the correct technique of the front lever, because we give it for granted, but a lot of times we receive questions about the scapulas, about the hips, and so on.
Yeah. Should I go, or do you want to go?
Yes, you can do it.
Okay, a few points I named before. Let's maybe start with the most common mistakes you see people do. So I would say mistake number one is scapula position. Many people just hang in the front lever, meaning they're not really activating their lats well. Their shoulders are in a slightly protracted position, and they have a very hard time keeping their chest neutral, and while pushing their arms down. Doing that allows you to really feel the lat and really work with the lat and have those nice lines and not a banana form, so to say. Second mistake we see extremely often is the bending of arms. That usually comes from a place of a hard time of activating the lats on one side, or missing strength on the other. When bending arms, you will engage your arm flexors more, so your biceps, and it will help you hold the front lever. But the correct form is with completely extended arms. We actually have some clients that have an extremely hard time with this, and they struggle a lot to keep the arm straight. And the difference between keeping a straight arm front lever, a bent arm front lever, is ginormous. Often, a thing you can look at is how you're gripping. If you're using a very strong false grip, the tendency to involve arm flexors will be bigger than when you actually are quite neutral. So there's a little tip for you that does correct the front lever for many. It's like a little clue that makes a big change for many. It might be a tiny bit more difficult in the beginning, but with time, you will notice that using a bigger muscle like the lat in the right way will make your front lever more stable over time. So it's an investment in the beginning where you feel like, oh, I suck now, but with time, it will actually pay off. That said, sinking hips are the next mistake that is usually given by or no activation of the glutes, or usually no activation of hip flexors and core. Like Leo said, working on your dragon flag will honestly fix this mistake for the big part. If your dragon flag is strong, your core shouldn't be the problem in the front lever. If it is, you're doing probably the dragon flag wrong, and you're arching your back and you're using your erectors instead of your abdomen. A little tip for the dragon flag itself here: to really feel the abs, many people need to pike it a tiny bit in the beginning, and then with time start to open it in a beautiful line. So that is something to look out for sure. I can't think of and scapular position. Online, probably one of the biggest misconception, and there's so many people still saying that, is that you have to retract the shoulder blades in the front lever. The position of the shoulder blades is neutral and depressed, meaning you honestly don't have to really think about what doing. Like when I enter the front lever, I push down my shoulders, I feel my lats, and I know I'm doing it right. That's it. Basta, finito. Not bringing the shoulder blades together like crazy. That's what leads to many people actually using other little muscles, like said before, and creating. They don't manage to hold your weight, and that leads to injury. So don't extremize anything. It should feel good. It should feel comfortable. And if you feel like there's people that can't that their neutral position looks a tiny bit like a protraction, and you have to accept that. Like anatomy is individual, and protraction with one person will look different like protraction with another. For example, me, who's quite kyphotic, my planche looks always very rounded. Leo's way less, for example, but my shoulder blades are quite mobile, and if I depress them in the front lever, my line is actually quite nice, and you can't see the kyphosis. So it's always individual. Don't judge somebody just because you see a front lever. When your eyes are trained and you have worked with a certain athlete for a while, you will know what is possible for him and what not.
Yes, also maintaining retraction with harder variations of the front lever, it's impossible even for the strongest guys. So
yeah,
it's very hard. I think that they do on this. However, it's when I see that someone has a really hard time in keeping the chest neutral, so they are closing the chest a lot. They are going into strong protraction. I always I say to them to try to retract the scapulas before going into position. So no just depression, retract the scapulas before going into position, and this usually then results automatically in a neutral chest, in neutral scapulas once they are into position, because they simply cannot hold it with retract.
I feel like open your chest is just a better clue than bring your shoulder. But like when you're in there and you think about, okay, open your chest, it's just like in the pull-up. If you open your chest, you automatically will go a tiny bit into this position. And naturally with gravity pulling you down, it won't be possible to bring the shoulder blades together. And if you force it, you will injure yourself. So
yes, agreed.
It's always the truth is always somewhere in between. It's never if online somebody says like it's just this way and this is the way you have to do it, you can for a fact know that he doesn't know what he's talking about, or he hasn't had enough experience. I mean, there are things that are just right or wrong because there are definitions in this sport, but there's no best way, there's no best exercise, there's no there are general rules, but there's if somebody always talks in extremes, you can be sure he's talking bullshit. Just a little rant. So progressions. What are the front lever progressions that we usually use? And then I would say we go a tiny bit into the big question, isometrics versus dynamics, because I think that's like probably still the most common question in front lever or planche training. When do I do dynamic moves? When do I do isometrics? So let's go.
Okay, so let's start from the most common scenario, which is I've built a good muscle base, and for what regards my muscles, I want just to maintain what I've gained. So in this case, beside the front lever work, I always tend to put something like from 8 to 12 sets of mixed horizontal and pulling and vertical pulling exercises, which can be, since we are training guys that a lot of times don't have even access to this gym, this usually will consist in pull-ups, chin-ups, and Australian pull-ups done in slightly higher rep ranges. So I usually use from 5 to 10 to 12 repetitions in order just to maintain the muscle mass to an area 1 to 2 to 3. It doesn't make too much of a difference, and this assures us to not lose the muscle that we have built for our skills. On the other side, I don't want to push more than that, because everything we do more than that will also influence then the progression on the front lever. So we want to do the minimum that allows us to not lose muscle. And in this case, for what regards the front lever specifically, in comparison, for example, to the planche, I usually use a lower amount of sets, because I found that the front lever it's less technical than a planche, and even that it's more fatiguing, because it's involving bigger muscles usually. So the front in the planche, the prime mover are the anterior delts, which are not that big. Of course, you always involve other muscles, but in the front lever you are involving all the back musculature, which is way bigger. And I don't know, by experience I can tell that it's more fatiguing. Okay, so maybe of course this can change on average. This can change, but on average there are always outliers, but on average I would say that's the case. And what I do, so I usually start from 2 times per week, and something from 8 to 10 sets per week in total, so 4 and 4 or 5 and 5. And and I think this is what you're also doing in the first weeks, since it's not that reasonable to try to just increase the whole times every week. What we do is, of course, we test the progression, and let's say that someone is able to do 10 seconds of hold of the advanced stack front lever, then I would start with 4 seconds of 5 to 6, 4 sets of 5 to 6 seconds, 2 times per week. And there, instead of really increasing the seconds, I would add 1 or 2, usually 1 set from week to week until the deload, and then on the next mesocycle, I would just go back to the initial number of sets, or a little bit higher in comparison to the first mesocycle, and start from higher cycles. So if in the first month I started from 4 sets of 6, then in the second one I will start with 4 by 8 if we were lucky, or 5 by 7 or something like that. But yes, in general, don't expect to increase your seconds from week to week. Okay, so because that's not realistic. Of course, it doesn't have to be too easy. So if you are training with an RP of 5, maybe that's a little bit too easy. In this case, you can raise a little bit the seconds also in the same mesocycle, and that's it. And substantially, I would try to follow this path until something strange happens, and this usually works in the beginning, especially for beginners and intermediate athletes. I personally never had the necessity to do front lever 3 times per week, to train someone with 3 times per week front lever, because usually first, it's very rare that someone has just the goal of front lever. So usually they also want to achieve weighted pull-ups, muscle ups, one arm pull-ups, which basically involve the same muscles. So yes, that's one reason. And also because, yes, until now, 2 times per week for almost everyone was enough. Of course, if someone has just the goal of training the front lever, you can think about a little bit higher frequencies. But in that case, I would use at least on one day a different variation to work on something else, to insert some variation. And a thing that I usually do, it's there are 2 hard days, but in the day in the middle, even if someone is training for pull-ups, one-arm pull-ups, and muscle-ups, if the schedule allows me, I insert front lever pull-ups done with very, very light intensities, just to add some explosive movement there, technical movement there. And yes, I found that that's a good way to recall a little bit the motor pattern one more time per week. So, and this has to be done very easy. So an error, a mistake that is often done is to push too much than the front lever pull-ups. And yes, it's not a great idea in my opinion. So for example, if someone is able to do 4 repetitions of pike front lever pull-up, what I usually do is a 5x1 or 3 sets of 2 and then 3 sets of 1, something like that, with short rest, just to go over the movement a little bit.
Yeah.
And yes, that's it. So I don't use a lot auto regulation, so with beginners and intermediate. So I almost always give fixed seconds, and then once someone is more advanced, in the back of sets that usually are done, if done, they are done with easier versions. I can give two auto-regulated. I can assign auto-regulated work, for example, 2 sets of advanced stack front lever to RAR3. Okay, and this allows me also to see during the weeks if something is changing or not, if we're doing too much because maybe the whole times are decreasing, or if we are doing everything nicely because maybe the whole times are increasing. So I think this is the base from where I start. Then, of course, in time, you learn to see which are the characteristics of each individual, and from there, the training becomes more and more personalized. So there are big differences between individuals, in my opinion.
Yeah. So maybe progressions. The progressions we use are the standard ones that you find in most tutorials. Like we usually start from the advanced tuck, some cases the tuck, and we always work on dragon flags on the side. So never forget about those. Those are like I think 99% the cases. There are clients that have back pain when performing them or things like that, then we can use other forms of raises or anti-extension exercises for the core. But in most cases, you use the dragon flag on the side, and then we have the advanced tuck, the one leg tuck front lever. One leg tuck front lever uses less core since your hips are not in a 90-degree angle with one leg. So you might want to think about pushing the dragon flag a tiny bit more there. Then the one leg advanced tuck front lever. We don't like the straddle generally, just because the straddle compared to the planche, where the straddle planche is actually a defined skill. In the front lever, it isn't. And the straddle itself is very difficult to program, because if you're like straddle a tiny bit more, you can add 3 seconds of hold time. If you straddle a tiny bit less, you can decrease your hold time by 4 seconds. Like the playground in which you can cheat is ginormous. So we prefer using very standardized one leg variations. And we usually go like after one leg advance. If the client is comfortable holding it, we use the half leg front lever. If hip mobility isn't there, we work on hip mobility on one side, and we might go on something like front lever with foot on shin or foot on ankle. Depending on how fast he's progressing and if he needs like this middle step, yes or no. And once that is very, very stable, and that doesn't mean that somebody needs to reach a certain amount of seconds in the skill, but it's something you can, first of all, if you are an experienced coach, see. If somebody holds a half leg front lever for 8 seconds and you see that the quality is excellent, he maybe can't hold it for more, but he's extremely stable when holding it. You can let him test the full front lever, and you might see that his full front lever is exactly as stable as the half leg, just a tiny bit shorter. I wouldn't insert the full front lever yet, or maybe in extremely low volume and extremely buffered. And I would keep working on half lay and dynamic variations to maybe push a few seconds more. But that's something like you don't have to reach 10 seconds to go to the next variation. It's something you learn with time. And if you have a coach who knows what he's doing, he's going to test you, see where the mancos are, where you're missing something, and then in case work on those weak spots in detail to then let you go to the next progression. So there's no reach 20 seconds of this before doing this. That's usually too long anyway. And then you reach the full front lever. And afterwards, like Leo said about the front lever pull-up, well, a thing we like to do is to work on it on the side if there's space for it. And often it doesn't make really sense to work on front lever pull-ups before you actually have reached the full front lever. So only on the side with low sets and very easy progression as a technical recall, or to have an explosive movement, like if the client doesn't have a muscle up in the plan, for example, can be extremely nice variation to have in there. It's fun. And you just do it on the side. And once you reach the full front lever and it's very stable, you can focus more on the front lever pull-ups for a while, and you will get to the full front lever pull-ups quite fast that way. It's something like we like to do generally without spending too much volume on trying front lever pull-ups or doing weird front lever pull-ups with bands and everything else you see online. Like there's a lot of mixing and doing 10,000 movements and a lot of reps of those. The more simple your training is, the easier it is to track, the easier it is to really see and understand what to do. Yeah, and I think that sums up the progressions of front lever. And Leo, like the principles of training it are always the ones Leo named before. The exceptions are depending on weak spots of clients. So, and once you reached the full front lever, if you have worked on front lever pull-ups on the side, in the meantime, with very easy progressions, you can, and your front lever is very solid, so 8 to 12 seconds, something like that, you can start working on front lever pull-ups directly. Of course, they're going through the same progressions and focusing more your training on that, and use that as your main progression and main skill, while maintaining the front lever by doing easy buffered holds. So you don't lose seconds on the front lever. Of course, if you only work on front lever pull-ups, you might lose hold time. And yeah, I think that sums up front lever training. It gets interesting if the clients have certain weak spots and there are problems in progressing. So the optimal progression streamlined is very rare and only takes place with people with great genetics. And usually that is not the case. So I think we could talk about when to insert isometrics, or when do we use isometrics, or when do we use dynamic exercises for the front lever, because dynamic exercises of the front lever can be extremely useful if used the right way. So what's your opinion on that, and when would you use something like front lever raises or front lever pulls for clients?
Okay, so we always have to start from the principle of specificity, and this is why we always talk about isometrics in first place. So if you want to learn an isometric skill, we have to train it for the majority of time isometrically. So what we do is to set always a progression based on isometrics, and start from there. If we see after a couple of months that we have tried, in which we have tried to progress like that, and in which we made sure that the volume is enough, the intensity is enough, the sleep is good, and so on, then we can really start about thinking using something else, because there is clearly something which is not working. So in that case, I like to insert some dynamic work, and I don't even start immediately with some with repetitions. I mean, for me, dynamic work can be just starting instead of going into the front lever with in the standard weight. In the standard way, just go into the front lever starting from inverted hang, or in some rare cases starting from dead hang, which usually I think it's a little bit harder. But I mean, just by doing these little things, things can change a little bit, especially for what regards front lever from inverted hang. It's I mean, sometimes I also use it in the beginning, to be honest, because sometimes I see that the client is really unable to close. To enter in the front lever nicely if he goes in the front lever in the classical way, which is from
Very good point.
or already straight arms or from slightly bent elbows into extended arms. So sometimes I also use this variation in the beginning. But yes, that's the first thing that I would do in order to implement some variation. So changing the way of going into the front lever. And if even that doesn't work, then you can really think about using some pulls, which are the dynamic movement, which goes from front lever to inverted hang to front lever. So that's one repetition. And also this one can be done in with every variation of the front lever. For some variations, you will need to use rings because it's not comfortable to do them on on a bar because the band leg can limit you in the movement. And here I would program them like a normal strength training, but also here it's way easier to focus on progressing on sets, at least in the beginning, because these are, I mean, adding just one repetition to an exercise like that, it's very hard. So it doesn't make sense to program something like, I mean, it's not realistic if someone can just do, I don't know, 4 repetitions of pulls and you start with 4 sets of 2. I mean, let's give this example. So if you're able to do 4 repetitions of advanced stack front lever pulls, it's not realistic to start with a 4x2. I mean, it's realistic to start with a 4x2, but you cannot expect to do then a 4x3 the next week, a 4x4, and a 4x5. It simply doesn't work like that. That works maybe just with very, very genetically gifted people, which don't even require such such exercise, but they can progress nicely with just isometrics. So yes, be careful. It's not like training with weights where you can scale by 1 and 25 kgs, but here you have to use other methods which are usually increasing sets and here and there some repetition. And yes, personally, the pulls are my best. The variation that I like the most, to be honest. And yes, another type of dynamics exercise is you can do the same thing but with raises. So from dead hang already aligned in the correct position, you go into the front lever, you hold it for 1 second. So it's very important to hold at least 1 or 2 seconds because otherwise it doesn't make too much sense, since usually if you do fast front lever raises in the final position, yes, you are horizontal with your body, but you are not really in the correct front lever position because the arms are usually too perpendicular to the ground in comparison to a normal front lever where the arms are inclined, and that's due to the momentum. Of course, if you do them very slowly, then it's a little bit more specific, but yes, usually I like to insert some holes in the upper part, in the front lever itself. And then maybe there are also other variations like a full front lever raise, and then during the eccentric you hold the movement for 1 second, and then you go down, and then you repeat. But these are movements on which it's very hard to progress, like I said, on repetitions. But yes, they can be an idea. Other ones, I don't know if you want to add other movements, and of course, every one of these movements it's more suited for a particular case. I don't know if you want to add something else.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe like the so there. I think there's two reasons to use dynamic exercises, and ones are really if you can't progress anymore, to bring in some variations, and you have some clients from time to time that just respond so much better to that dynamic work compared to isometric works. Usually there are exceptions, but we've found some, and then it lays in the eye of the coach to recognize that and to set progressions mostly on that. And the second reason is, in fact, technique. For example, as Leo said, starting from the inverted hang actually is extremely useful to teach the right scapular position and proprioception. Entering the front lever is actually quite hard for many people. So it doesn't come natural, and that teaches you the right, like you kind of end up in the right position if you have the right clues and you let yourself go down. Then, of course, always with a hold at the bottom. If you just fall through, you're too weak for it, don't do it. And then, in fact, there's some cases where some dynamic exercises in easier variations make a lot of sense to work on your weak points. For example, in fact, inverted hang, if you have problems with the right scapular position when entering the front lever. If you tend to bend arms, for example, a very good exercise to really understand the activation of the lat while keeping the arm straight, and you really need to focus on it, are raises. Pulls are generally extremely good to really feel the lat and understand how to use the lat in the front lever itself. And all these exercises that are a tiny bit more complex, the pulls, or for example, the full raise with hold afterwards, are extremely useful if you want to maintain the front lever afterwards. Meaning if you want to just do 3 sets of 1 rep, using these hard variations will help you maintain the front lever without doing too much work or spending too much time with it. And it's fun, and it gives variation and makes the training a tiny bit more colorful. Leo, for example, who went through an extremely long bodybuilding phase, the way he maintained and actually improved his front lever during this time was by doing just a few sets of one of these variations without like doing extremely long holds on the front lever, but just doing 1 rep for 3 sets of this, and that's good. And he improved this way. But these things are done way more advanced, and once you've honestly reached that point, you have great genetics if you reached it in a short time and you just did it by case, and then probably doesn't matter to you anyway. And if this is not the case, it's something you can think about and insert while focusing on other stuff. Probably maybe the last point. Now you have reached your full front lever, you can hold it for 10, 15 seconds. You maybe have reached your first front lever pull-up. What are options? What are skills you can work on now? Probably if you're really strong at it and you like the movement, you can start working on a P-bar Victorian or touch front lever holds, fun stuff like that. And we might have an episode on more advanced skills in the future. I think we are over the 40 minutes mark. If you have some last things to say, Leo, I think this is like the basics of the front lever. We named that.
Yes, I would maybe add a couple of tips. So first tip, once you have mastered the 1 leg advanced tag front lever, it's where you can think about implementing or the half lay or the 1 leg foot on ankle, usually front lever. So which one to use? It's a question that I've got from time to time. And the best thing to do really is test them both. Look which looks better and decide from there. So there is not a mess. So use your strong points and use the one which comes more natural to you. So at the end, the important one is the full front lever. So it really doesn't matter which ones you use. So for example, I prefer more the half lay front lever. I really like the half lay front lever. For someone, it's extremely hard to do and stressful to do, so it depends a lot. So test them both, see what looks better. Another thing, it's don't think that once you are able to hold one progression for 1 2 seconds that means that you have to train that progression now. So if I'm able to hold the front lever for 1 or 2 seconds, that's not enough to train it directly and to put it directly in the training plan. That doesn't mean that you are weaker or something. It just means that there are better ways to still progress on it. So let's say that you have reached 5 to 6 seconds of half lay front lever. You test the full front lever. You can hold it for 2 seconds. Very good. I mean, nice achievement, but that doesn't mean you have to use it. So from the next mesocycle, again, go again with the half lay front lever, maybe implement some slight variation, and continue to progress on holds that you can train more easily. Because I mean, if you have just 2 seconds of full front lever and for a couple of days you sleep less than usual, what you will do then in the training if you have 3 sets of 1 second? It's impossible, and also you are not building any kind of volume on it. So try to put your ego aside. As always, progress on the things that make sense. I mean, training it, in that case, training the full front lever would correspond to a power lifter. Training always, doing 3 sets of a max of 1 RM of deadlift doesn't really make sense. And I think it's easy to understand if you think about powerlifting or weightlifting, but it's hard for people to understand it if we talk about skills. And that holds for every single skill. So nothing... it's not that you cannot test it. So you should test it between months, but that if you unlock it at one time, it doesn't mean that you have to insert it. So, for example, I have a lot of clients with which I train, for example, the tech planche, and then every month, if I see that they are holding the tech planche for 10 seconds and they have learned how to keep the hips in the correct position for the advanced tack planche with using bent arm tack advanced tack planches, then I will tell them that's the advanced tack planche. And then, okay, maybe he's able to hold it for 1 second. That's a great achievement, and you should be happy for that achievement, but that doesn't mean you have to train it. And then maybe after 2 months, this test will transform in 5 seconds, and then you can start to train it directly. So that's very important. So having a skill doesn't mean that you have to train it and that it has to be in the plan, and it's usually not the best idea if you cannot hold it for longer times.
Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode and it cleared up your questions. If you have any more questions, you can ask them in the comments. Tell us what you want to hear next. Like the video if you liked it. Dislike it if you disliked it. And have a great day.